Welcome to Cultivating Courage, a podcast exploring fear, courage, and stepping into a life filled with purpose, connection, and love. In today's episode, we're talking about the courage it takes just to survive sometimes, and Matt's desire to be Darth Vader. All right, y'all. I am Kristin Robinson, your host of Cultivating Courage. Welcome to this episode. I am the owner and head coach of Thrive Coaching Studio, where we work with women to step into their power by exploring fear and behavior patterns that are holding us back. I'm joined today by the miraculous Matt Maxwell. Welcome.
I like that. The alliteration's great. And I'm going to put that on my profiles from now on. Hi, I'm Matt. I am a coach. I work one-on-one with individuals and also work with organizations around organizational culture transformation. And I'm a public speaker and an author and an LSAT instructor and an actor. Hire me. If you're the casting director for Star Wars, that's like my one acting dream.
You talk about it a lot, so I feel like it's me. It might happen.
Well, it's like the thing when someone asks, "What would you do if you knew you could not fail?"
You would be in Star Wars?
Well, I would definitely be in Star Wars. And I would have some kind of cool Jedi powers in it.
Yeah.
Or I'd be like a really cool bad guy like Boba Fett, but where you can see my face.
Interesting.
That's one. Or it's like I would ask out Shakira. You know?
Brilliant. I love that.
I don't know. Maybe that's faded. That was like 10 years ago. I'd have to think about my new celebrity crush. But like if I knew I couldn't fail.
Yeah. If you knew their answer was going to be yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like, this is a random question that I have. Sorry, guys. We'll get to the real topic soon. Do you like playing as an actor characters that are complete opposite of who you are as a person? Because like you said, oh, maybe I'd be a really like good, like a bad guy. And like, that's hard for me to picture you playing a bad guy. Yeah. But I can see kind of like how fun that would be to step out of yourself sometimes. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, I've played, I don't know if I'd call him a bad guy, but I have played, basically a bad guy.
Yeah.
Like not a villain, like in a melodrama.
Yeah.
But a guy who like kind of very questionably interacts with a teenage girl.
Oh.
Yeah, like pretty creepy.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's never clear exactly what occurs, but like it's creepy.
Yeah.
And that was fine for a little bit.
Yeah.
But like literally I would hear gasps from the audience of like, ugh. And like I'd hear like, oh, that guy's creepy.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like that. I'd even walk out after a show and people would kind of like look away from me because
they're so uncomfortable
they just associated that
yeah.
character with me. Mm-hmm. And so after a show, people would just kind of like, I could see
there
them
he
like,
is.
Yeah, like I don't want to look at him because he creeps me out.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah.
That wasn't very much fun.
Right.
It was a wonderful play. So I loved being, it was August Osage County, which is an amazing play. But I think like we do all have a side of us that kind of like a shadow side, right?
Yeah.
And there's like, sometimes I really want to yell at people and like let them have it.
Yeah.
And I won't because that's not what a good person does.
Right.
And I want to be a good person.
Yeah.
So stage sometimes does give you a chance to play some of that out in really safe ways.
Yeah.
And there's something about a really good villain.
Yeah, for sure.
That's just like kind of fun.
Oh yeah. Every good story needs a hero and a villain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Alan Rickman in Robin Hood, the Kevin Costner Robin Hood. He's like so fun as the Sheriff of Nottingham. And he's like kind of evil, but you just like, So that kind of villain would be fun.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. If you want to, just let me know what villain you'd like me to play, and I'll do like 3 minutes of podcast as that villain.
We're going to have to like go back and like mine our episodes for ideas.
Yeah, that's right.
Because like every episode we have
an
idea.
This is episode 340 in which Matt plays Darth Vader.
We've run out of other
We're
topics.
going to talk about the same stuff, but he's going to breathe heavily the whole episode.
We're still going to talk about courage.
Yeah.
But
Can you hear that? And is that picking up on the mic? I don't know.
that's awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Enough.
Thanks.
All right. So back to courage
Yes.
and cultivating courage.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there are particular, I don't know, experiences or events that courage consistently shows up for you?
Oh, where I'm consistently courageous.
Yeah. I'm all about the, what is it called? Alliterations?
Yeah. Consistent courage. Well, I've talked about this in a prior episode, but I feel like a lot of what I'm up to in my relationship world requires just like a consistent degree of courage, because there's a lot of past story about how bad it can go and how awful things can be, and memories that'll come up around that. So that just requires, and I feel like through my own coaching and my own healing work and different things I've done to set a lot of that aside, you know, I'm able to act authentically and courageously in the face of that fear in service of creating what I really long for there.
Yeah. Would you say that the process and the kind of self-exploration itself was an act of courage?
For some of it. I mean, I definitely, or not. Like, I think there's, I think there's like different ways that we can reinvent or transform. And sometimes we might just see like, oh, you know, I kind of do things this way, and that's not really helping me experience life the way I want to. So I'm going to do it differently.
Right. Easy peasy.
Which is really awesome if we have that awareness. And that's a place where coaching can help, because a coach might reflect like, hey, what's the predictable result of that way of being, you know, or that way of doing? I think for a lot of us, transformation comes from, well, I'll use an example. It's like I was really, really struggling. I still do sometimes, but this breakup that happened 2.5 years ago was like, the exact way it played out has turned out to be just incredibly, horribly difficult for me. Just so painful in every way. It's like the universe was just like twisting the knife in all of the ways that would be the most painful for me.
Just when you thought you couldn't feel any worse.
Yeah, it was like everything about it was designed the way I was in the relationship, and the way I was and how it ended, and the way she was and what happened after, and it was so painful. And it was like I've had some more depressed times in my life, but it was the one time in my life where like every day was just about survival. I don't really want to be alive. It hurts. All of this hurts so much. Just getting through the day was a victory.
Yeah.
You know, it was just really dark, difficult time of my life. And all of these amazing things came from that. It was horrible when I was in it. And there were days where it was like, this will never end.
Yep.
You know, and that's where we get into despair and some real darkness. But like, it was so dark and helped me to see all of these things, not just that I was doing to others, but like ways I was treating myself, things I was believing about myself that were just like massively causing me to suffer. And I had it kind of reflected to me in a context like I'm going too far into the story, but basically what was reflected to me is like, it can be difficult to accept the size of the board you have to be hit with in order to wake up.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
You know, and it's like I've experienced all this amazing transformation and experiences of self-love and compassion and growth and connection, and a whole broad new range of things are possible for me because of that awful, awful time.
Right.
So I don't remember why I'm sharing this. I think you asked something that I'm saying this in response to, and I don't remember what it is. But it's something like, I don't know. Do you remember?
Not really.
Okay. Well, I think my point in sharing all of that story was.
Oh, I do remember what I asked. I asked if you thought that self-exploration, I mean, I think I remember. Sorry, guys, if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I-
they can just
if-
rewind and
yeah.
find out, but it's a complete
or
mystery
just
from
fast
where we're
or
at.
just fast forward, whatever. I think maybe the question that I had asked was if you think that self-exploration in itself is courageous.
Oh, yeah. And I think what I'm trying to, I don't know. I have these great stories, and then I'm like, what?
Where was I going with
Why
that?
didn't someone stop me?
That's why I'm taking a storytelling class right now, because I'm the same way.
No, I think my point of that was sometimes our defaults that are basically based in fear will become clearly bankrupt. That way of being will become so painful and will take us down a path
Right,
that
that there's
eventually
no
is
other
a dead
choice.
end, where it's just like, no, this can't be it. We bankrupt that way of being.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like kind of like in the like addiction recovery world, right? There's like a bottoming out,
Right.
where it's just like you have to hit bottom before you can see like this does not work. I have to choose something else.
Yeah.
And that something else might be really outside of our comfort zone.
Right.
You know, so I don't think it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
But for some of the stuff where I've now become really courageous, it's basically like I didn't have a choice. The
Yeah.
way that life was going for me was so awful and it becomes so awful that it was just kind of like I was slapped by a board.
Yeah.
It was just like, wake up.
Right.
And then it was like, oh, and I wish I didn't have to be hit by that board to get
Yeah.
to this. So, yeah, I think courage can be a choice, and sometimes it's almost forced on us. But there's always still a choice, right? And
Yeah.
there is like, I do feel grateful for the circumstances that kind of forced me into a lot of transformation, and also acknowledge myself for the courage it took
Yeah.
in that to have it go differently.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that and eventually getting to your point, because that's something I've never really thought about. Like, I've never really thought about it in terms of not being a choice. I've never thought about it being like, a way of being has gotten so bad that it really doesn't take courage to change it, because you just have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a couple things come to me as you're saying that. One is when that idea of the board was kind of suggested or reflected, the person also said, and even though that was really, really painful, many people don't get that bored until they're about to die.
Oh,
That's when they wake
Wow.
up and realize
Yeah.
what their life might have been if they hadn't been living from fear,
yeah.
you know? So she's like, isn't it a gift that you had that experience when you can...
Right. When you still
Change
have
stuff.
something, you still have time to do something about it, to
Yeah.
learn that lesson and to
And-
make those changes.
And this is kind of like taking it to a little bit more like darker or more serious of a place.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's similar to people who, for example, are in situations of domestic abuse, right? Where they've been, for whatever reason, kind of put into this situation where they're being abused. And as we know, like a lot of people stay in that situation.
Yeah.
And from the outside, we can see like, oh, it would be so much better for you outside of this.
Yeah.
When you're with particularly a partner who's abusive, you know? And for some of those people, they're able to choose out of it. And sometimes it's not until it reaches a certain point where it's like, no,
Yeah.
this just can't go on anymore.
Yep.
And so in a way you're kind of forced. It still requires so much courage because the unknown outside of that relationship, and
Particularly
I
if
just
it's
want to recognize that like I'm
physical,
speaking as
yeah.
someone who's never really been in this. So
Yeah.
if you're listening and this is you, I just want to let you know I don't know what it's like. But what I imagine is the degree of courage to step out of that is incredible because of the unknown, like stepping out of any relationship.
So many unknowns.
Exactly. Around how your life's going to be, how you're going to
the
live,
abuser's
how
gonna
you're going to
react.
Exactly.
Like
There's
on top of what you would be, the unknowns you would have in a normal relationship, the unknowns that you would have. On top of that, you have what's the reaction and the potential retaliation going to be.
yeah.
Yeah.
and like the courage.
Mm-hmm.
And what comes to me there is like some of that could be driven by it's either my life ends
Mm-hmm.
or I have to go through this unknown road,
Yeah.
you know, and it's still a tremendous act of courage to go
Yeah.
along that.
And where
unknown
does
road.
that courage come from?
Well, what occurs to me, and it depends, but it's probably coming from love.
Yeah.
At some place, right?
Yeah.
It might be just desperation too,
Yeah.
like this can't go on anymore. But to me, the choice to live in the space of like really horrifyingly painful circumstances
Yeah.
is love.
Right.
There's some hope and belief that this person deserves and can have something better.
Right.
And there might be days where it just seems like it's all dark, but to just keep surviving sometimes truly is an amazingly courageous choice.
Yeah.
And it might be for love of oneself, or it might be for love of others, for children, for
Right.
but for me, like that's the place where sometimes that's all that's left, is like I love this human, and even though it seems impossible, I want to give this human a chance at a better life.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
What's the impact of that for you?
Well, one, that's not at all like where I was expecting things to go. But two, I think it's like I said before, I've never really thought of courage in such a, like, I don't know if big is the right word, but, I think I sometimes put courage in this kind of everyday box and don't think about it in a much more serious kind of context.
Yeah. For me,
yeah.
it's like kind of inspiring.
Well, yeah, because I think that if you look at, situations like that, or situations, like truly life and death kind of situations where you have to step up and be courageous. I mean, first responders, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a certain level of courage there. And I don't know that they would necessarily identify it that way. Maybe they would just, it's my job. Like,
Yeah.
but to me that, running towards danger takes courage. Putting your life in danger every day, every time you do that, is courage on a completely different level than kind of the new age hippie courage that I tend to think about more.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the courage to be yourself.
Yeah.
Like it's there's just, it's heavier than that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think it's interesting because like recognizing the like severity of some human conditions and the like personal power that like shows forth in the courage to change someone's circumstances is just like incredible when you consider like all the varieties of the ways that we can be challenged as humans.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I've become aware of is like we don't know what's running through someone's mind that's generating the fear. So
Well, and we don't know their backstory. You don't know their story.
right, we just don't know.
Yeah.
And so there are some things where I clearly recognize like, wow, this seems to require an incredible degree of courage. There are other things where I'm like, this is so easy and silly. Why are you so afraid?
Yeah.
And I judge someone's
Right.
fear and the
Yep.
courage acting in the face of that as like, psh,
Yeah. What's the big deal? Get
I
over
don't-
it.
For me,
Yeah.
acting on stage, not a big deal. I walk out, I love it, I have a great time.
Yeah.
For someone else, that might be absolutely terrifying,
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, like it would be easy for me to judge just purely coming from my own perspectives and paradigms of like, "Ugh, that's nothing.
Yeah.
But we just don't know in any degree
Right.
what is going on for anybody when they're taking action in the face of fear.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said for respecting people's journeys and recognizing that you don't know their journey. Like, even if you've known somebody for 10 years, you don't know their whole journey probably. and to know that there's things along that path that have created whatever choices they're making now to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of this really inspiring moment for me. I was at a swim meet last year for my niece, a high school swim meet, and have you gone to swim meets?
I've been to like one swim meet.
Okay, like it's pretty foreign for me.
Yeah.
So especially like high school, I didn't, and so there's like a few hundred people there, and my niece goes to this big suburban high school in Colorado that has a ton of swimmers. Oh. They have like 3 JV teams or something.
My
I mean, like
gosh.
it's just huge.
Yeah.
Hundreds, like I don't know, 150 girls on the swim team or something.
That's
more, just like
more people
the women
that were in my
the
entire
men,
high school.
Like, so just a big swimming program.
Yeah.
And the swim meet was against a high school that was much smaller swimming program. Probably like neighborhoods that were more humble than the ones where my niece's high school. So there's hundreds of people watching because there's so many swimmers.
Right.
And, like you're kind of watching, but there's all these races going on, and you basically only really care when your person's swimming. And every once in a while, a race is kind of close, and everybody kind of gets into it. And but it's just kind of fun. You just kind of chill out. It was fun.
Yeah.
I liked it. And of course, it was really fun to see my niece swim and cheer her on.
Yeah.
But then what happens is, so there's all these races going on, and you're kind of vaguely paying attention. But even when the race is happening, it's just like people are swimming, and if you're used to watching running, it seems like it's almost kind of in slow motion, even though they're going fast.
Right.
It doesn't seem
even though they know, if you were in the pool next to them, you'd be
I would be so much faster than all of them.
Oh,
interesting. I mean, look, they're not even going that fast.
Look at your self-awareness.
From like 200 yards away, it just doesn't look like they're moving that quick.
Yeah. Like, what's the big deal?
Oh man, I would get in there
Michael
and
Phelps,
I would just,
Yeah.
So easy to judge it, right? Anyway, in the middle of all of that, so nobody's really paying attention. In the middle of the meet, they stop the meet, and there's diving.
Ooh.
Yeah. And there's only one person diving at a time.
Right.
It's like everybody gets quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It's a totally different environment when there's a bunch of swimmers in the lane doing their races. Everybody is watching the one person diving.
Yeah.
And then, immediately after that dive, everybody watches the judges give them a numerical score evaluating that dive.
Right.
Right? Like, talk about
on the
putting
spot.
yourself out there and having to be open to judgment of every single person there. Like, I was just in awe. And I imagine that's something you might get used to over time, just like I get used to acting. But I was still just like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
So what is already, to me, a really scary scenario. Hundreds of people watching you, nothing else going on, judges ready to evaluate you, give you a score that you could easily make it mean something about your worth. And this woman from the other high school gets up. She's probably a freshman. Seems to have very little physical coordination, to the extent that I don't know anything about diving or how it's scored, but her dive seemed horrible to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and pretty simple, like going in an arc and then
down.
Yeah.
No twists,
I don't know what
no
that's called.
Just a standard dive.
And she would be so off by the time she would land in the water that, like, you kind of couldn't help but laugh and feel really bad about it.
Yeah.
Because it was just so bad.
Yeah.
And, at first I kind of saw her and I was just kind of like, oh. And then it was just kind of like, oh, that's too bad to laugh at. And you saw it wasn't just one.
Right.
And the judges have no choice.
They have to.
It's like 1, 2, because it's just so off. And they go through several rounds of dives.
Right. So, and she got up
every single time
and went
in
again
front of the entire crowd.
Yeah.
And did these dives that I just projecting would be like horrified if that was me.
Right.
And of course there's like judgy brain that's like, what is this person doing? Why are they diving? What in the world would be enjoyable about there's all kinds of judgy stuff going on. And at the same time, like, it was one of the most, I started crying by the end.
Yeah.
Because it was so inspiring to see this person doing something they enjoy, because they enjoy it. It doesn't matter how bad they are. They're doing it because they want to. And I don't know, maybe it was her first week of diving, or maybe
Right.
that's her physical limit. I
Right.
don't know, but there was something about it that by the end I was just like so inspired by the persistence and the like courage of doing that in front of all those people, no matter how low her score was.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome.
What comes up for me from that is something you and I talk about a lot, which is approaching things from a place of play and fun and practice. And I think it'd be a lot for a high schooler to maybe be so like in tune and in touch, but like that's kind of what that is a reminder to me. Like, yeah, it's everything is practice. If you come at things from a place of this can be fun, this is practice, it's different than I have to do this perfectly. I have to do this dive perfectly, and if I don't do this dive perfectly, then what? I don't know. Then what? But but if you come at it from every time I do a dive, I'm learning something. I'm getting better at it. It's practice. It's fun. Like that for me is what came up in that story.
Where in your life would a shift to seeing it as practice be really helpful for you?
Probably something to do with my business. I mean, like everything. I think probably like doing workshops, like doing more like just finding the space, talking to people about it, inviting people to the workshops, like come, like, and then not just like getting people there, but then it happening and being like, it's practice. It's fine. Like it's going to go how it goes. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fine. And it's practice. Yeah. So
I'm looking at my iPad because this discussion is reminding me of a book and I can't remember the author again.
So with the idea of practicing though, since that's, and I think we're close to wrapping up, and you can still find your book.
Okay,
Sorry.
I got it. No, you're good.
Okay. Do you want to tell people what the book is?
Yeah.
And then we'll get into like practices.
Yeah, just to kind of sum up what I see in that conversation, or how I think about the idea of practice, of just approaching everything you're up to in life as I'm just practicing.
Yeah.
Right? I'm practicing. And it takes the pressure off. And this is kind of consistent with, the book is Mindset, which is really popular. Do you know Mindset?
I don't actually.
I don't really love the name of it. It's like Mindset, the New Psychology of Success.
Oh, maybe I have heard of
It
that.
sounds silly, but the basic idea of mindset's really, really powerful. It's by Carol Dweck, by the way. Great. It's a great book.
I love her.
Yeah.
I know her.
Yeah,
I didn't know
and
that
this
was
is
her
kind of
book.
like her thing.
Yeah.
She's I don't
Yeah,
wanna talk
growth
about her.
mindset.
Yeah,
She's like a growth
that's
mindset
what mindset
expert.
is.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
she's the person that
Yeah, she
created that
created it.
whole
Yep,
idea.
absolutely.
Or I think. Anyways, the whole idea is right, like whether you think you can improve at something determines a lot of factor. Like it's hugely predictive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Growth
In terms
mindset
of how you act
versus
in a lot
a
of
fixed
different areas.
mindset. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the idea is an example might be like you're in 5th grade math and you get 5 out of the 7 questions wrong. Do you tell yourself, I'm bad at math, I'm never going to understand this? Or do you say, oh, well, I guess I need to practice more. I guess I need to do this more, and then I'll get better.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between kind of the fixed mindset and the growth mindset is, can I learn this? Can I get better at it?
Yeah, and if you have the idea in mind that however you're doing at a thing now is not how it will always be, or is not indicative of your absolute capability, then you'll happily try it out.
Right.
And so in any area, some of what is generating our fear is the fear that if I do this one thing poorly this day, that means I'm
Right. It's
this is
predictive.
what are we making it mean?
Yep.
If we're making it mean, that is my capability. I am bad at X, Y, or Z.
Right.
That's it.
I did it one time. I was bad at it. I
Yeah.
must be bad at it.
Then of course it's going to seem super scary. Of course it will. Because that's going to prove to the world and yourself how good you are at that thing for here, ever after.
Yep.
Right?
You can't possibly get better at it.
If that's where you're coming from.
Right. Exactly.
And so the idea of practice is stepping into that growth mindset of like, no, I'm just practicing.
Yeah. Just practice.
You know, I'm practicing doing a podcast.
Yes, we are.
Sorry,
you guys
everybody.
are on that
This is
journey
practice.
with us.
Of anything, it's just practice.
Yeah.
And it actually never has to be performance.
Yeah.
I'm standing up to give a speech to what would be your big scary speech, please?
Oh,
I'm giving the State of the Union. Did I bring in politics?
are you
Right.
running for president?
That's just practice.
Stay
is my
tuned, you
point.
guys. There
That's
might
just
be an
practice.
announcement on a
Yeah,
future
just
podcast.
Wait, just wait. Okay.
Yeah.
So practice
Yes, practice for the week.
is practice.
But practice. Oh
What are you going to practice?
no, I think it's your turn, man.
Okay. So for me, from our conversation, I think I want to look at where in my life is performance still coming up, where I'm bringing that kind of fixed mindset and like I
Right.
need to be a certain place, and if I'm not, that would be horrible. And where would that be in my life right now? I think it's probably in the new business that I'm creating, because I'm making a lot of kind of what seem to be important decisions
Right.
in terms of how we're going to operate and how we'll market ourselves, and just a lot of the things we'll be about as a company. And I think I've got this mindset of like, oh my gosh, I can't mess this up. Oh, it'd be so bad if I.
Right.
So there's kind of this performance mentality around it, like
I
I'm
have
just
to get
making it
this
too
right,
important.
and I can't go to the next step until I've
got
finished
all these
this
things
one
right,
thing.
and this
Yeah.
is my one thing that will show that I'm worthwhile, right? Just
Right.
really stepping out of any of that and just being
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm practicing starting a company.
Right.
And let's see how it goes. Maybe
Exactly.
it goes great, maybe it doesn't. It's all practice.
Right.
I can learn what I want to from it, and also maybe amazing things will come from it.
Yeah.
But if it's just practice, it doesn't feel so serious.
Right. I
That's
love
where
that.
I'm going to practice.
Yeah. All right. So
That's where I'm going to practice practicing.
So to sum the practice for this week up, if I can, because I'm joining in and we invite you, our listeners, to join in as well, is to recognize areas in your life where you might be struggling to, I may say this kind of the wrong way. This is how I'm hearing it.
Cool.
But recognize areas in your life where you may be kind of stuck or overthinking things because you're worried about an outcome or doing things right, or getting things wrong. And instead, lighten that load by looking at that as practice. Going to basketball practice, going to volleyball practice, have piano lessons. I mean, we practice everything else. Why can't we practice life?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Anything else that comes up for you?
No, thank you.
Okay. So thank you to our listeners, as always. If this episode brought anything up for you that you would like to talk to either one of us about in more depth, we're happy to do any sort of follow-up with you. You can find both.
Or like,
yes.
I imagine there could also be just like a place where you post comments.
Oh, yeah,
and then you're like,
absolutely.
hey, I loved this thing that Matt did with the Darth Vader breath. Bring that back in episode 340. If that's what you want to say, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. If you love our future podcast ideas, please let us know in the comments below. Or for real,
Reach
like
out
if you
to
have
us.
real comments,
Yeah.
leave those too. Because I think one of the things that we really want to do with this podcast, or a goal of mine anyway, of this podcast, is to create a community. So I would love to have people be commenting, not just, to us on the content, but as there are comments posted, what resonated with you, take your stand. Like if you say, oh, I don't really want to do that practice, but this came up for me and this is what I want to do, post that practice in our comments so that we can support you in your efforts to do that. And so that the community can, rally around each other. Like there's a huge, huge goal of mine for this podcast. So let us know what you're up to in the comments. And you can leave those comments in the same place you can find us both, which is cultivatingcouragepodcast.com. And Matt, if people are looking to connect with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Pretty soon you'll be able to find my website. Maybe we'll put that in later. Or find me on Instagram. I'm Matty Maxwell, Matty Maxwell.
Awesome. You guys can find me on Instagram at Robinson Kristin, Kristin. You can also check out my website at thrivecoachingstudio.com. And as always, we invite and encourage you to subscribe wherever you're listening to our podcast.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.